going to be much more nervous. And we did a bit of recording beforehand as well, early this year.
When the world lost Christine McVie, it wasn't just the passing of a musician. It was the silencing of one of the most poetic voices in rock history. Known for her soulful songwriting and calm presence amid the stormy chaos of Fleetwood Mac, Christine was the glue that held one of the most volatile bands together. Yet behind her graceful smile and timeless melodies like Songbird and You Make Loving Fun lay decades of heartbreak, sacrifice, and solitude that most fans never truly saw. Christine McVie was never the loudest member of Fleetwood Mac, but she was its heart. While the band's internal romances, betrayals, and battles often took the spotlight, Christine quietly endured her own emotional storms. She lived through the band's meteoric rise and messy implosions, losing love, peace, and ultimately her health along the way. Even after stepping away from fame to find solitude, tragedy continued to follow her. In her final years, Christine seemed at peace, content with her legacy, grateful for her fans and still deeply connected to her music. But what few knew was that her health had been deteriorating far longer than anyone realized. The woman who had given the world some of its most beautiful love songs was quietly fighting her own fading strength. And when her passing was announced in 2022, it revealed not only the end of a legendary career, but also the painful story of a woman who gave everything to her art and paid the ultimate price for it. Christine McVie was never meant to be a rock star. Born Christine Perfect in the quiet English countryside in 1943, she grew up surrounded by classical music, encouraged by a father who was a concert violinist and a mother who was a psychic and faith healer. From a young age, Christine showed a natural gift for melody. Her fingers seemed to move across the piano keys as if guided by instinct. But unlike most children with such talent, she wasn't driven by fame or fortune. For Christine, music was an escape, a place where emotions made sense even when life didn't. Her early years were marked by modesty and self-doubt. She studied sculpture at college but found herself constantly drawn back to the piano. In the 1960s, she joined the British blues band Chicken Shack, where her smoky voice and hauntingly beautiful style stood out. She even won a Melody Maker Award for Best Female Vocalist, a rare honor at the time. But her life would change forever when she met a young musician named John McVie, the quiet bassist from a new band called Fleetwood Mac. Their marriage in 1968 marked the beginning of one of rock's most complicated love stories. Christine soon joined Fleetwood Mac officially, completing a lineup that would go on to define 1970s rock. While the band went through endless lineups, one thing remained constant: Christine's steady hand. She wasn't just a keyboardist. She was the emotional anchor in a sea of egos, addictions, and heartbreak. When Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham joined in 1975, the band's dynamic exploded, creatively and personally. As Fleetwood Mac rose to superstardom with Rumors, Christine's songs became some of the band's most beloved. Don't Stop, You Make Loving Fun, and Songbird carried a warmth and hope that contrasted the chaos behind the scenes. But few realized that You Make Loving Fun was inspired by an affair Christine had with the band's lighting director, a secret she kept even as her marriage to John McVie fell apart during the very tour promoting Rumors. While the others openly feuded, Christine suffered in silence. She hated confrontation and preferred to pour her pain into her music. Songbird became her anthem of heartbreak, a song she wrote alone one night in an empty auditorium. She once said it came out of nowhere, but those who knew her understood that it was born from years of emotional exhaustion and longing for peace. Even in moments of triumph, Christine felt isolated. As her bandmates made headlines for drama, she longed for normalcy. Fame never suited her. She found comfort in simple things: painting, cooking, and the quiet of her home in the English countryside. But the deeper Fleetwood Mac's success grew, the harder it became to escape the madness. Every reunion, every tour reopened old wounds. By the late 1980s, the endless cycle of recording, touring, and personal turmoil had drained her. Christine began to withdraw from the spotlight, her bright smile dimming. Her marriage was long over, and her relationships never seemed to last. She loved deeply but was often left alone. In interviews, she would laugh off her loneliness, but friends knew she was yearning for something that fame could never give her: peace of mind. Christine McVie wasn't just the woman behind the piano. She was the quiet force that held Fleetwood Mac together when everything else was falling apart. And as the years went by, the toll of that role, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, began to show in ways she could no longer hide. By the early 1980s, Fleetwood Mac had become one of the most famous bands on the planet. They had sold millions of records, packed stadiums, and written songs that defined a generation. But behind the glitter and the applause, the band was falling apart, and Christine McVie was caught in the middle. Her relationship with John McVie had long ended, yet the two continued performing side by side, pretending nothing was wrong. It was a cruel irony. Night after night, Christine sang "You Make Loving Fun," a song about a love affair that had destroyed her marriage. In front of the man it had once been about, Fleetwood Mac's internal drama became legendary. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham's relationship was in ruins. Mick Fleetwood was dealing with his own heartbreak and financial struggles, and through it all, Christine tried to keep the peace. She was the calm in the chaos, the one who smiled for interviews, the one who quietly fixed what was broken. But behind the scenes, she was unraveling too. Fame had become exhausting. The long nights, the relentless touring, and the constant tension had taken a toll on her mental health. In 1984, Christine released a solo album, a rare moment where she stepped out of Fleetwood Mac's shadow. The album included the hit "Got a Hold on Me," which showed her signature optimism and warmth. Yet even in her solo success, Christine's lyrics spoke of loneliness and longing. Her songs were her diary, and each one revealed another piece of her soul. Her bandmates often described her as steady, but Christine was quietly battling fear and fatigue. She had developed severe stage fright, something she had kept hidden for years. Even as she smiled on stage, her hands would tremble before performances. Fame, once thrilling, had become a cage. She later admitted she had started drinking heavily, just to calm her nerves. Then came her short-lived marriage to Eddie Quintela, a Portuguese keyboardist. They shared a creative bond and even co-wrote songs together, including "Little Lies," one of Fleetwood Mac's biggest hits. But like many relationships in her life, it didn't last. By the early 1990s, Christine was divorced again and increasingly reclusive. She began spending more time at her home in Kent, England, far from the band, far from the spotlight. In 1998, Fleetwood Mac was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It should have been a moment of triumph. But shortly after the ceremony, Christine announced she was leaving the band. She told fans she wanted to live a quiet life and be an ordinary person again. Few understood how serious she was. She sold her home in Los Angeles, bought a small country estate, and disappeared from public life for almost 16 years. During those years, Christine battled anxiety and struggled to find happiness. She missed her bandmates but couldn't bring herself to return. "I didn't know who I was without Fleetwood Mac," she once said. "But I also didn't know how to be me inside it anymore." The band continued touring without her, and though she supported them from afar, she kept her distance, afraid that returning would reopen old wounds. The fame that had brought her everything had also taken so much away: her peace, her privacy, and her ability to trust love again. While the rest of Fleetwood Mac's story became about fame and money, Christine's story was one of quiet survival. A woman who gave everything to music and was left alone with her thoughts when the lights went out. For years, fans assumed Christine McVie's story had reached a peaceful ending. She was living in the English countryside, away from the chaos of the music industry, content to spend her days gardening, cooking, and playing piano just for herself. But beneath that peaceful surface, Christine was struggling. The isolation that had once felt healing began to weigh heavily on her. She missed the music, the camaraderie, and even the chaos that had defined so much of her life. In interviews from her later years, Christine admitted that she often felt forgotten. While her bandmates, particularly Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, continued to perform and stay in the spotlight, Christine's absence left her feeling disconnected from the band she had helped build. She once described her time away as like being in a dark tunnel with no light at the end. The woman who had written songs about hope and love now felt invisible, trapped between the desire to stay hidden and the longing to be heard again. Her return to Fleetwood Mac in 2014 was both unexpected and emotional. After years of saying she would never come back, Christine finally found the courage to face her fears. It was Mick Fleetwood who encouraged her to rejoin, telling her that the band was incomplete without her. When she walked back on stage for the first time in 16 years, the audience erupted into applause. Tears streamed down her face as she sat behind the piano, her voice as smooth and soulful as ever. "It was like I'd never left," she said afterward. "But I also realized how much time I'd lost." For a while, it seemed Christine had found her peace again. She released a collaborative album with Lindsey Buckingham in 2017 and toured the world one last time with Fleetwood Mac. But even as fans celebrated her comeback, her health had quietly begun to decline. The long tours took a toll on her aging body, and she began to withdraw again, missing shows and avoiding interviews. Friends described her as fragile but determined. She still had her sense of humor, still spoke fondly of her bandmates, but she seemed aware that time was catching up to her. "I'm not the girl I used to be," she told one interviewer softly. "I'm just grateful I got to share the music before I go." It was a bittersweet admission, one that hinted at the quiet acceptance of a woman who knew her story was nearing its final chapter as she retreated from the public eye once more. Christine spent her last years surrounded by her music. She continued to write songs, though few ever heard them. She played piano daily and often revisited her old compositions, particularly Songbird. The melody that had once symbolized heartbreak now brought her peace. "It's the song I want to be remembered by," she once said. "It's everything I ever wanted to say about love." Her final years were marked by simplicity, early mornings, cups of tea, and handwritten notes of gratitude to the fans who still loved her. Yet even as she found moments of calm, her health worsened behind closed doors. Christine kept her illness private, not wanting pity or headlines. True to her nature, she faced it quietly, with grace and dignity. By the time Fleetwood Mac's members learned how serious her condition had become, it was already too late for a proper goodbye. Christine McVie had always been the heart of Fleetwood Mac, but even hearts, no matter how strong, eventually grow tired. When news broke on November 30th, 2022, that Christine McVie had passed away at the age of 79, the music world fell silent. It felt as though the gentle heartbeat of Fleetwood Mac had stopped forever. Her death was announced as the result of a short illness, though the details were kept private, just as she had wanted. To the very end, Christine remained true to herself, quiet, graceful, and humble. The outpouring of love that followed was immense. Fans flooded social media with memories, lyrics, and photos of the woman who had written the soundtrack to their lives. Stevie Nicks shared a handwritten letter calling Christine her best friend in the whole world and saying that she hadn't even known her beloved bandmate was ill until it was too late. Mick Fleetwood wrote that part of his heart had flown away. Even Lindsey Buckingham, despite their complicated history, described her as a musical soulmate and the soul of Fleetwood Mac. But perhaps the most heartbreaking tribute came from fans who realized how much Christine had quietly endured. While the other members of Fleetwood Mac had always been larger-than-life figures, Christine had carried her pain in silence. She was the peacekeeper, the stabilizer, and the gentle presence that kept the band from completely self-destructing. Without her, Fleetwood Mac simply didn't feel the same, and perhaps never would again. Christine's passing forced many to reflect on her contributions that were often overshadowed by the louder personalities around her. She was responsible for some of Fleetwood Mac's most timeless songs, Everywhere, Little Lies, Say You Love Me, and, of course, Songbird. Her melodies were simple yet powerful, her lyrics filled with hope and humanity. She didn't just write love songs. She wrote about forgiveness, resilience, and the quiet strength that comes from surviving heartbreak. As the band members reunited privately to honor her memory, Mick Fleetwood said something that captured Christine's legacy perfectly. "She left us the blueprint for grace." It was true. Even in death, Christine's influence could be felt, in every soft piano chord, in every lyric about love lost and found again. In the months following her passing, a surge of interest in her solo work began. Fans who had grown up idolizing Stevie Nicks were now rediscovering Christine's songs, realizing that she had always been the steady heartbeat beneath the band's drama. Music historians and critics began calling her the quiet architect of Fleetwood Mac's sound. Yet for all the praise and remembrance, Christine's story remained tinged with sadness. She had spent her life writing about love, but never quite found lasting happiness for herself. She had been adored by millions, but longed only for peace. In many ways, her life mirrored her music, beautiful, emotional, but always tinged with melancholy. Her final wish was a simple one, that Songbird be played at her funeral. As those haunting piano notes filled the room, it was as if Christine herself was speaking one last time, her voice rising softly, saying goodbye not with pain, but with peace. "And I wish you all the love in the world, but most of all, I wish it from myself." Those words summed up Christine McVie's life, a woman who gave love endlessly through her music, even when she didn't always receive it in return. Today, her legacy lives on in every generation that discovers Fleetwood Mac. And while the world may remember the scandals, the heartbreaks, and the fame, Christine McVie will forever be remembered as the songbird who kept singing, even when her own heart was breaking.